Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2023 installment of the National Association for Gifted Children Legacy Archive Project. For the better part of a decade, the Conceptual Foundations Network at NAGC has been formally collecting and cataloging video interviews with influential figures in the field of gifted education, building on interviews obtained since the early 2000s. Historically, the network has identified individual practitioners and researchers and highlights their professional journeys. However, this year, the network is interviewing 4 scholars who constitute strong contributors and contributions to the field, but who also represent a 4-stage legacy, each having studied under the prior researcher. I feel like we need to point out the 4-stage legacy beginning today with Dr. Lindsay Lee, the mentee for Dr. Ann Wren, and Dr. Wren, mentee for Dr. Jonathan Plucker, and Dr. Plucker was a mentee of Dr. Carolyn Callahan. So this collection of 4 interviews is intended to highlight the generational nature of thought contribution as it impacts practice. I'm Joyce Miller, Chair-elect of the Conceptual Foundations Network, and we're proud to have with us today Dr. Lindsay Ellis Lee. Dr. Lee is an assistant research professor in the Department of Pediatrics and a faculty research affiliate with the Center for Excellence in Early Childhood Learning and Development at East Tennessee State University. Dr. Lee graduated from the University of North Texas, UNT, with a Bachelor of Arts in Social Science in 2010, and her Ph.D. degree in Educational Psychology with a concentration in Gifted and Talented Education in 2021. During her graduate studies, she studied under Dr. Wren from 2016 to 2021. In 2021, she was a recipient of a NAGC Carolyn Callahan Doctoral Student Award for an outstanding contribution of scholarship in gifted education. In 2022, her dissertation won a NAGC Research and Evaluation Network's Dissertation Award. Her dissertation focused on evaluating program diversity and the probability of gifted identification with the TARTS test of creative thinking. Dr. Lee's research interests include equitably identifying advanced students, evaluating psychological and educational measurements, talent development across domains, and developing learning environments that encourage growth. She is currently working on optimizing gifted identification practices across the United States on a Jacob Javits-funded collaborative project. Thank you so much for your work. Our questions now begin with going back and taking a look at that connection with your mentor, Dr. Wren. We know that there are many influences on a young scholar's work as they exit their doctoral program to define themselves. But the philosophical framework of specific individuals often resonate deeply through that early work. And it seems as if Dr. Wren was such a figure for you, initially influencing the direction and nature of your scholarship in gifted education. Would you share a bit with us on how you perceived Ann's scholarship? And of course, Ann was a mentee of Jonathan Plucker, and I'm sure you were probably influenced by both, but how do you perceive Ann's scholarship when you studied together, and how that scholarship informed the work you pursued in your early career?
So absolutely, Dr. Wren was my advisor and eventual chair of my dissertation, but I recall this phone call with Dr. Wren before entering the program, and I was very interested in the motivation of gifted students in my advanced placement courses, and I had taught advanced placement, world history, and psychology, and I was developing curriculum for these courses, and I really wanted to help my students develop their psychosocial skills. And I remember this call of her encouraging me to apply and come study with her, and looking over her work. I was just like, I really want to study with this professor, and like she had social emotional development and psychosocial skill development. All of that was, the bulk of her work. But in my studies, I took Anne's theories and paradigms class and her psychosocial needs course. And within that psychosocial needs course led me to be interested in some other concepts like perfectionism and goal orientation and the imposter phenomenon. And the fruits of that labor from that course led me to write a paper with Dr. Wren and other colleagues on the relationship of perfectionism and the imposter phenomenon with honors college students, because a lot of her work also focused on honors college students. And her scholarship on self-concept, the big fish, little pond effect, greatly influenced that work, and my own experiences as a doctoral student combating feelings of imposter phenomenon. And Dr. Wren helped me she not only introduced me to that concept of imposter phenomenon, but she helped me better overcome feelings of that and improve my own mental health, and encouraged me to persist through my doctoral studies. So in her theories and paradigms class, we discussed Diane Chin's paradigms of gifted education, and that also heavily influenced my perspective. But I reflected on where I stood on those paradigmatic stances. So, gifted child, talent development, or differentiation. And I think I'm a little bit of all of these, as we probably all are. There's significant overlap, but I think I heavily am within the talent development differentiation corner, which led me to pursue research on how we could better identify talent for advanced learning opportunities in schools. So we also reflected on the need for the gifted label, and reading Borland's work. And I actually ended up reflecting and resonating with that work as well. And, my opinion now is that, the key reason we should label is to better match students with needed services. So that, is more in line with my, equitable identification line, but there's many facets of Anne's work and teaching that influenced me. But Dr. Plucker, was her advisor or mentor. She studied with him, and he has also been a constant inspiration to me. And I align with a lot of his lines of research, equitable access, open science practices, creativity, specifically creativity assessments, and this social cultural aspects of talent development. And Dr. Wren, again, was my professor and mentor, but she studied with him, and they edited and wrote a book titled From Giftedness to Gifted Education. And that book was used in our theories and paradigms class. And so we read the majority of that text. And there's actually, it's probably not one of his most notable works, but there's a chapter within that, and it's titled Social Cultural Approaches to Gifted Education, and it really resonated with me. And I remember getting so excited and inspired to apply both Vygotsky and Csikszentmihalyi's work to talent development, which he talks about in that chapter. And Plucker's work with Wren looked at college students and their experiences with honors college students. There's a chapter in there about that. And they've written other things about that. And, I was really inspired to look at those kinds of experiences with Dr. Wren and in that other work that I was talking about. And I'm trying to think of, I was really interested in these competitive environments, and not only how we recruit and identify for them, but how we can retain diverse groups of students, and help make our students feel welcome and like they belong. And so there's a lot of relationships with their work together that also was that heavily influenced my scholarship and my perceptions of gifted education. And then Plucker, obviously, he studies creativity assessment, and specifically the Torrance test of creative thinking was a huge influence on me as well. And he looked at predictability of how scores related to later achievement. And it made me think about, well, what about gifted identification? And so my dissertation looked at the predictability of scores on the Torrance test as well as others to gifted identification. So there's other aspects, but I can talk about it later.
Okay. Well, of course, over time, we've seen some significant changes in gifted education, scholarship, and practice, and our work cycles in and out of public favor. We continue to reveal strengths and weaknesses in whom we serve and how, and our understanding of talent and its development moves forward. Can you take a few minutes to paint the trajectory of your scholarship from your doctoral phase to your current work?
Yeah, so I think I talked about it a bit, but yeah, so where do I begin? I read so Plucker and Peters have that Excellence Gaps book, and it really urged me to address both equity and excellence within schools, and how like school policies and like larger policies impact how we can better identify and serve students in the classroom. And I had my first American Educational Research Association poster was on excellence gaps in advanced placement exams. And I remember I read it twice because I just really enjoyed that work. And it really there's obviously other influences, but I ended up synthesizing a lot of my interests into my dissertation. So I mentioned how I was interested in creativity assessments and this idea of identification and equity. And I was like, well, I could look at all of that. And so my dissertation evaluated the program diversity and probability of being identified as gifted with the Torrance test of creative thinking. So my early career and how I've shifted from that is still looking within that. So I've continued to explore how we can best identify students in the relation to how we use assessments and equitable access. So not just which assessments are we using, but how are we using them? And I had found from my dissertation that the mere inclusion of a creativity assessment like the Torrance test isn't going to solve underrepresentation, and disproportionality remains even with that inclusion. There's scholarship out there that has been like, we need to include a creativity assessment to be more equitable, but I don't know that that's the fix that people think it'll be. And so I've shifted my focus since then, like to how our macro and micro environments how we can shape those, and how we could develop talent within those environments, how we could identify and then develop that talent, and use assessments in a different way to look at, possibly growth instead of just it being a one-time, metric. So I think that, yeah, there needs to be closer look within classrooms and how we're aligning our assessments and programs and curriculum, which actually aligns with Dr. Callahan's work. So I think, yeah, there's a lot more work that we need to do, but and even including like how we can improve the accuracy and transparency in research, which also both Dr. Wren and Dr. Plucker have influenced me in implementing open science practices within my work.
Our format for the Legacy series this year highlights the generational development and ultimately transfer of responsibility for pursuing better practice in service to the field. As you continue to produce your own good work, you are also responsible for guiding other researchers in gifted education. How would you imagine that they would describe your influence on their work?
So I think a lot of my focus has been on identification and on assessment practices, as well as equity. And I think that's probably the greatest impact to, upcoming scholars. I have quite a few chapters on identification and how we could better identify, how we can better evaluate identification systems. So I think that that line of research is probably going to be the most influential. However, I've looked at how creative environments are shaped in gifted classrooms, and that's another line of research that I'm continuing to develop. So I'm hoping that that can also be a source of inspiration to others and how we can create, psychologically safe learning environments and help retain students when they get into the program. So.
Well, finally, I would like to invite you to speak a little bit on what you have learned regarding the role of research in the work of our community. There is perhaps a persistent tension between the worlds of practice and theory, not just in our field of study. How do you see that relationship at its best?
So I think there needs to be a mutually beneficial relationship that's not one-sided. I think that some practitioners may distrust researchers because they're like, they might feel like there's, some type of hierarchy, or there's, they come in with thinking that they know everything and they're trying to tell them what to do, but actually establishing a healthy, productive relationship includes reciprocity. So how we can both help one another and showing some humility as a researcher. And you can learn just as much from practitioners as they could learn from you. So it's a bi-directional relationship, and listening first to their needs and then seeing how you can develop a productive research relationship is going to be the most successful and whenever you're trying to pursue that type of research to practice and dialogue that you're trying to have with, educational practitioners.
So as we reach closure here, what would you tell a young student thinking about beginning doctoral studies and making a decision about mentor and the impact that that relationship can have on their career? What words of wisdom would you have for a beginning doctoral student?
I think choose a mentor that not only aligns with your interests, but has your best interest at heart. That you feel like you can talk to them and go to them for, things beyond academics, but that you can be authentically yourself. And I think I've had this question asked of me before from other graduate students or people thinking about coming into the program. And it's someone that you could see working with and writing with, and not just, it's a personality clicking too, like you share interests like any relationship. You have that familiarity, but you have this understanding, and they want to help lift you. It's not just about you lifting them. It's about doing things together, and if they can show that in some way to you, that you can go look at their publications and see their writing styles and who they're writing with, and if they're writing with their graduate students. And I think that has been really beneficial for me, because Dr. Wren was such a cheerleader, and she really wanted to get to know me and what my interests were and let me explore. I have a lot of lines of things that I was interested in, but she was like, okay, well, let's make this a little bit more focused. How can these things relate? She mentions like your umbrella of research. And so like with her doctoral students, and if you can find someone that lets you explore your own interests, be who you are, and then encourage you and help provide opportunities for you to write and research things that you're interested in.
Thank you. It definitely is an important decision. Is there anything else you would like to add before we reach closure?
Not that I can think of. I feel like there's so many areas that influenced my scholarship, and each one of Dr. Wren, Dr. Plucker, and Dr. Callahan's work were all sources of inspiration as I've continued as an early scholar. And I'm just honored that I get to talk about that. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your time. Thank you for your contributions to the field.